Why do planes fly to Japan by going through Alaska? It looks like a mistake, but it's actually the fastest. Let's uncover why pilots avoid the deep Pacific Ocean void. Open up a flight tracker and look at a live map of routes between the United States and East Asia, say, a flight from Los Angeles to Tokyo. If you've spent your life looking at the flat maps hanging on classroom walls, what you see will look like a massive geographical mistake. The plane isn't heading west across the blue void of the Pacific. Instead, it's crawling northwest. It's hugging the coast of Canada, crossing over the rugged wilderness of Alaska, and sometimes practically waving at the Arctic Circle before dropping down past Russia toward Japan. On a flat map, it looks like the pilot took a wrong turn at Albuquerque and added 3 or 4 hours to the trip for no apparent reason. But here's the reality. That pilot isn't lost, and the airline isn't trying to waste expensive jet fuel. In fact, that bizarre, curving path is the shortest possible distance between those 2 points. The reason most commercial flights seem to avoid the middle of the Pacific Ocean has nothing to do with mystery, and everything to do with geometry, safety engineering, and the simple fact that the Pacific is the most unforgiving stretch of water on the planet. Let's break it down. First, the map problem. Most of us grew up with the Mercator projection, the flat world map where Greenland looks roughly the same size as Africa. It's a useful map for navigation in a specific technical sense, but it distorts distances massively, especially at higher latitudes. On a Mercator map, the straight line between Los Angeles and Tokyo looks like it should go directly west across the Pacific. Simple. Obvious. But the Earth isn't flat. And on a sphere, the shortest path between 2 points isn't a straight line on a flat map. It's what's called a great circle route. A great circle is any circle you get when you slice through a sphere through its center. The equator is a great circle. So are the lines of longitude. And the shortest path between any 2 points on a sphere always follows a great circle. When you calculate the great circle route between Los Angeles and Tokyo, it curves up through the North Pacific, skimming the Aleutian Islands and the edge of Alaska. On a globe, which is what the Earth actually is, that curve is shorter than going straight west. Not slightly shorter, significantly shorter. We're talking hours of flight time and thousands of dollars in fuel. So that's the first answer. The routes that look strange on a flat map are actually the most efficient routes that exist. Physics chose them, not the airlines. But that still doesn't explain why planes stay away from the deep middle of the Pacific, the vast stretch of ocean between Hawaii and Asia. And this is where it gets more interesting. The rule is called ETOPS, Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. It sounds like a bureaucratic alphabet soup, but the concept behind it is straightforward. If one engine on a twin-engine aircraft fails, in flight, how long can the plane safely fly on the remaining engine to reach a diversion airport? For most modern long-haul aircraft, ETOPS ratings specify a maximum diversion time, typically 180 minutes, though some aircraft have ratings up to 330 minutes. That means the flight path has to stay within that time window of a suitable airport at all times. If the plane is 4 hours away from the nearest runway on a single engine, that route isn't approved. Now, look at the Pacific Ocean. It covers about 165 million square kilometers. It's wider at its broadest point than the distance to the moon. And in the Central Pacific, the nearest suitable diversion, airports can be extremely far apart. The deep Pacific simply doesn't have the network of emergency landing options that allows airlines to route through it safely under ETOPS constraints. Hawaii helps. It sits in the middle of the ocean and gives trans-Pacific routes a viable diversion point. That's one reason Los Angeles to Sydney or Los Angeles to Auckland can fly more directly across the Pacific. Hawaii is there as a lifeline roughly halfway through. But the northern and central Pacific between Asia and North America? Far fewer options. which is part of why Anchorage, Alaska became such a strategically important aviation hub. It sits on the Great Circle routes between North America and Asia, and it provides exactly the kind of emergency diversion point that ETOPS governed routes require. There's also the weather. The Pacific isn't just vast, it's meteorologically complex in ways that affect flight planning continuously. The jet stream, a band of fast-moving air high in the atmosphere, flows roughly west to east across the North Pacific. Flights heading from Asia to North America can ride that jet stream and shave significant time off the journey, sometimes arriving more than an hour early. Flights heading the other direction route around it to avoid fighting a headwind that burns extra fuel. This means the optimal route isn't even the same depending on which direction you're flying. Eastbound and westbound flights between Asia and North America often follow completely different paths across the same ocean, calculated fresh before each departure, based on that day's weather and wind data. The storm systems over the Pacific are also a factor. The Central Pacific can host severe weather that flight planning systems route around routinely. On a long ocean crossing with limited diversion options, avoiding bad weather isn't just a comfort issue. It's a safety calculation. So, what about the flights that do cross the Pacific? More directly, they exist. Los Angeles to Sydney, Dallas to Sydney, San Francisco to Singapore. These routes do traverse significant stretches of the open Pacific, and they do it because the geometry works. Australia and Southeast Asia are positioned so that a more southerly Pacific crossing is actually the efficient Great Circle path. Hawaii often sits along or near these routes, providing that critical diversion point. And on the routes that previously required a fuel stop, say flights from the U.S. East Coast to Hong Kong or Singapore, advances in aircraft range have increasingly allowed non-stop service. The Boeing 787 and Airbus A350 were specifically designed with ultra-long-range capability that makes some of these routes viable without the intermediate stops that older aircraft required. The Pacific hasn't gotten smaller. The planes have just gotten better at crossing it. So when you look at a flight path that curves up toward Alaska and think it looks wrong, it doesn't. It's the most mathematically efficient route your plane could take, constrained by the safety requirements of flying over the most isolated stretch of water on Earth, optimized for the wind patterns of that particular day, and calculated with more precision than you might expect from what is, at its core, a metal tube hurtling through the sky at 900 kilometers per hour. The Pacific Ocean isn't avoided. It's respected. And next time you're on a flight to Tokyo watching the map show you over Anchorage, you can feel slightly smarter than the person in 14B who thinks the pilot got lost. Geometry always wins in the end. Knowledge is the best travel companion. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay curious and fly safe. See you next time. Goodbye.